our colleagues who are outside in the hallway. All right, so welcome to back to the conference. This is the first working session of the day, and hopefully you have a up-to-date agenda in front of you. And this session is about updates, reports, trends, and updates from national, regional, and international IG. And my name is Carlton Samuels. I've been around for a while. We are going to ask Mr. Casimir, Nigel Casimir, first to tell us about the Caribbean Internet Governance Forum at 13, year 13, to give us a little synopsis of what we have become from where we started. Nigel, as you know, is in the corporate world, Nigel will be a key man, and you'll put out key man insurance on him. He is a key man at the CTU and Bernadette's right hand. So I'm going to invite Nigel to tell us about CIFG at 13. Nigel?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carlton. This is the time of the CIGF when I typically come and bore you for half an hour with some of the history and stuff related to the CIGF. I won't do that this year. I'll only bore you for maybe 10 or 15 minutes with it. I'm looking for the slide advancer. But basically what we do in this, as a kind of an introduction to the process and procedure, especially for persons who haven't attended one of these before, is kind of give a background of where we've come from, where we're at, and really looking forward in the short term, what we're going to do. So as they bring it for me now. Thank you. It's still plugged into your computer, right? Okay. Yes, indeed. So I'll do a very quick review of our activities from the beginning to now. I think there are 2 slides on the current status and maybe 2 as well on the outlook for the future. Well, the CTU has been convening this forum from the outset. We've been created in 1989 basically to do telecoms policy work, but as technology has advanced, our remit has been expanded to include information and communications technologies. That was in 2003. And shortly thereafter as well, the membership of the CTU was expanded beyond just member states, because at heart we are an intergovernmental organization. So it's more than just the 20 member states. We've now included private sector and civil society membership, who have added a richness and great value to the policy development work that the CTU undertakes. So when we got involved, we were requested by the CARICOM Secretariat to address internet governance work for the Caribbean at a time when the World Summit on the Information Society was about to have its second and final session. Just in advance of that, we convened in September of 2005 in Georgetown, Guyana, the first Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. And the intention was was then and still is to harmonize Caribbean views around the various internet governance issues at hand. So since 2005, the approach we've taken has been a multi-stakeholder one. We've included governments, private sector, civil society, actors in our work. And the intention, because of the breadth of the scope of what internet governance covers, has always been to identify and focus on what we see as the Caribbean priority issues. And from some of the discussions yesterday, we heard back in 2005, one of the priority issues was getting electricity out such that people could have power to access these fancy services like internet access and that sort of thing. And one of our attendees mentioned that it's still, maybe the reliability of the electricity supply is still an issue today. All right, so we've been seeing what are the Caribbean priority issues. We focus on regional policy formulation, harmonizing, and we've sought to develop our capacity through project development and various capacity building initiatives. So those have been our goals, and I think overall still remain our goals. Go. Okay, maybe someone needs to help me advance the slide. Oh, okay, it did. So, as I said, in 2005, we convened this Caribbean Internet Governance Forum. And it is a non-hierarchical multi-stakeholder forum that is convened by the CTU. So CTU has some influence in getting people together to events like this. So we've taken advantage of that, but we've not taken an approach whereby, say, governments are in charge or anything. It is meant to be, and I think to a large extent has been, a multi-stakeholder forum. We've focused on harmonizing, we've focused on addressing priority matters. And the thing about having the CIGF, I guess, in the realm of the CTU, though, is that it also provides a pathway to influence the government policymakers. So we have a seat or an access to relevant government ministers and senior government officials through the CTU's Executive Council and Conference of Ministers. And the work outputs from the CIGF, we put there such that it can help in influencing their actions at the national level. When we began, of course, there were not other regional internet governance fora, and the first global internet governance forum took place after our first meeting. So, and in fact, it took place at the same time as our second meeting. So our focus is, as I had described, and it wasn't really to serve as a preparatory meeting for any other IGF, but as time has gone on, we see that there's probably some value in synergizing our work with the other IGFs that have cropped up in the interim. Right? So what we are seeking to do is enhance the synergies between the CIGF and the global IGF and other regional IGFs as well. Mention was made of the achievements, and this is a list of some here. This is our 13th forum. In addition to the forums like this, we've had multiple ministerial briefing sessions on internet governance over the years. We've produced a policy framework in its third edition, as the SG said this morning. But as well, we've done guideline documents concerning IPv6 transition, development of internet exchange points, and we've also developed, in conjunction with the Organization of American States, a Caribbean cybersecurity framework. So in addition to the general internet governance policy framework, there's also a cybersecurity framework that came out of our focused work in cybersecurity. We've been able to do all of this because we've been able to forge valuable partnerships with other organizations and persons in this space. And we've signed multiple MOUs to further the CIGF agenda, and using those partnerships, we've been able to have various workshops on technical and policy issues with respect to the internet governance with ISOC, ARIN, ICANN, and they've also continued to support our CIGF, as you saw and heard this morning. On multiple occasions, we've contributed to the global IGF proceedings. Our Secretary General has chaired workshops at the IGF at different stagings of the IGF. And we continue to liaise with the Global IGF right now through this this group of coordinators of national and regional IG initiatives. And mention has already been made of the recognition that the CTU and the Secretary General in particular has had of our activities. I've spoken about priority issues, Caribbean priority issues in internet governance, and I've spoken about the policy framework. This one slide shows down the left-hand column what have been identified as the priority issue areas for the Caribbean. Very quickly, we're talking infrastructure for broadband connectivity, the internet technical infrastructure, but as was mentioned yesterday, the internet technical infrastructure runs on the telecommunications infrastructure. So we used to call the first line physical infrastructure and the second line logical infrastructure, but this is the terminology we're using now. Third key area is legal frameworks and enforcement. Then there is internet content, public awareness and capacity building, and research. So those are the areas we've identified to date with respect to the major priorities for the Caribbean. And in the policy framework document, each of them has certain policy recommendations associated with it. I should mention that in the policy framework document as well, there is articulation of our vision for Caribbean Information Society, and also a mission for Caribbean internet governance. All right, so it's there, it's stated, and following those are the identified strategic priority areas. So I recommend for those not familiar that they take a look at the policy framework. It's on our CTU website. It's on the web page of this event. We welcome your comments on it. Since 2014, actually, it was in Bahamas, we presented at the CIGF there what we saw as a new approach for Caribbean internet governance. Notwithstanding the achievements, room for improvement was noted to be there in terms of getting action flowing at the national level. We found that, we need to find a way to get more people involved at the national level with these internet governance issues to start implementing some of the policy provisions that would have been harmonized at the regional level and recommended. Excuse me. So the new approach basically was in trying to identify the national level mainly, but sometimes at sub-regional or regional level as well, communities of interest, people or groups with like-minded sort of objectives to what we want to achieve under the internet governance rubric in the CIGF, to push the agenda at the national level. So ideas that came to mind were maybe if we could get more ISOC chapters or develop national IGFs and so on. In effect, getting these communities of interest to execute national internet governance activities. And there was some, on the bullet points, there are some of the thoughts of the things that they could be doing at the national level, doing continuous awareness and recognition campaigns, continuous progressive education for the different audiences, developing in the cybersecurity world CERTs, that's the this particular acronym could be translated Cybersecurity Incident Response Teams, strengthening our country code top-level domains operations. In many of the territories, there was a need for that to happen, and also in implementing specific projects, some of which we would be discussing and so on tomorrow when we deal with the issue of that Caribbean Internet Development Foundation. So basically, the thrust is towards building national capacity to follow through on some of the regional consensus points that would have been developed through something like the CIGF. So looking forward, we're going to continue our new thrust towards national IGFs, continue to work with Caribbean stakeholders to promote implementation of our policy framework recommendations. And this says at national and regional levels. So apart from identifying, say, regional objectives, how do we get it down to the national level? In this forum, if you look at the agenda, we propose a couple of workshop sessions, going to look at considering changes to what we are doing and the current areas of focus. We will be looking at agreeing or reviewing the priority areas for Caribbean internet governance. And we'll also be looking to enhance our process of ongoing collaboration. The CTU should shortly be reintroducing an online forum for internet governance such that in the interim between gatherings like this, we should be able to continue discussions on specific issues. So what can you do? You can get involved and make your voice heard. All stakeholder views being welcome and invited. Different speakers yesterday, and I'm sure going forward you will hear the possibilities for taking part in activities of ICANN, LACNIC, ARIN, ISOC, and so on. And as I mentioned myself, is that one doesn't have to be an organization to get involved with internet governance work. Individuals can have significant influence as well on the work of internet governance by taking part in the activities of its technical community organizations. All right, follow our internet governance content on the CTU website, and I hope to have the online forum going very shortly as well. And actively participate in this meeting and its workshops, because we want your ideas. You are here. Let's hear what your great ideas to take things forward. And at any time, you can submit comments and feedback to the CTU at that address there, CIGF@ctu.int. And that's where I'll leave it. Thank you very much. That would be the update, Mr. Chair, from CTU CIGF.
Thank you, Nigel. I'm going to reserve time at the end of it for any suggestions, ideas you might have for the CTU and Nigel going forward. I just want to step through the next set of events because they might be important and they might come together. Nigel used a word that I like, harmonize, because that's exactly what this is about, trying to find harmony across the region for our issues and how we present them and how we transfer or we communicate them globally. So we're going to move to the next step, and we're going to talk about national IGS in the Caribbean. Before I start and invite the presenters up, let me say a few things. We're talking about internet governance, and I'm going to use a phrase that actually determine what IGS are supposed to be. They're supposed to be catalysts for dialogue and an ideation for action on critical internet issues. So it's about dialogue, it's about developing ideas, and it's about addressing critical internet issues. And there is an IGF is always booted in a context that it is multi-stakeholder. Anybody have a seat at the table, and they're equally important in developing ideas, in accessing ideas, in transmitting ideas, and of course in determining what are finally the issues of high critical concern for a national and regional audience. That's what the IGF's about. And what you're going to hear next is some issues from IGFs we have had in the region. On your agenda, you'll see Belize. I just want to make a slight correction. Belize Cybersecurity Forum last year, or this year, was it? This year, was it, Nigel? Was not essentially a IGF, although it had some issues presented that you will see in the IGF all the time. But I will say this for what happened in Belize. I was there. I went to extraordinary lengths to be there. I took a 7-hour road trip to get out of Belize for another engagement from Belize City to Cancun. And I was happy to be there to assist and help what happened, because the Public Utilities Commission of Belize, led by John Avery as the chairman, and of course most of you know Kimano Barrow, who is a senior officer there, they did a really good job, an excellent job in that forum. If you see the engagement of all of the sectors in Belize, when you have the Chief Justice and you have senior judiciary officers sitting all day in a room engaging with people, that you don't see that very often across the Caribbean. And I'm telling you, people from the Central Bank of Belize and all that, these guys did a real bang-up job of getting these sectors together and keeping them engaged and keeping users engaged. So if that is any measure of success, or it should be a model that could be imported for any kind of IGF meeting. It involves multiple stakeholders, it was well organized, it gave voice to everybody who could conceivably have an interest in the issues at hand. So that's for Belize. The other ones you will know happened because they, I was telling about Jacqueline, has a different, or she adds something else to the meaning of the IGF. And she says, well, there's one little issue. For national IGF to be truly recognized, you must integrate yourself with the UN IGF by sending a report to it. And maybe St. Vincent and the Grenadines didn't send a report, but in my mind, they had taught us really bad. They had a multi-stakeholder grouping connected together and sitting down, ideating and conversing, and they had critical issues. They identified critical issues that they wish to carry on. That said, let me introduce and bring to the table here the next presenters. Jacqueline Morris, Rudy Daniel from St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Miss Ashel Ford from Barbados. Jacqueline is going to tell us about the Trinidad and Tobago IGF. Rudy is going to tell us about the St. Vincent and the Grenadines experience. And of course, Ashel will tell us about Barbados. A little bit about them. Jacqueline lives and works in Trinidad and Tobago. In addition to teaching at the University of Trinidad and Tobago, she also works in the fields of gender policy, internet governance, and Caribbean ICT issues. She currently sits as a representative from the UTT on the multi-stakeholder advisory group of Trinidad and Tobago, TT-MAG. You see that thing on their shirts here. An organization that works on internet-related policy issues. She's also recently appointed a director IGov TT, the National ICT Company of Trinidad and Tobago. For the IGF work and for the work in internet governance, you have to listen to the rest of this. She was a founding member of the WSIS Gender Caucus and was appointed a member of the UN Working Group of Experts on Internet Governance, WGIG. She has been a member of the Internet Governance Caucus for many years. She has a long association with ICANN, and that's just one arm of Internet Governance. As an appointed member of ALAC, that is the At-Large Advisory Committee, that was from 2005 to 2007. She chaired the ALAC in 2007, and she had further jobs as ALAC liaison to the CCNSO, which is the country code specific support organization in ICANN. She has also been a member of the BCEC, which is a group that we put together to select or develop the criteria for the board member serving from the user community. And she was associate chair of the ICANN NOMCOM 2010-2011. And of course, she was an ICANN non-com member. The non-com, as you know, is a group that selects leaders in ICANN. So we've been there. Rudolph Daniel. Rudy is a retired design development engineer from the Caribbean, a long-standing contributor to the Virtual Civic Forum, and a recipient of the first ICANN Fellowship in 2007. He served the Internet Community and IP Policy at AREN, that is American Regional Internet numbers, Aaron, on an ICON cross-community working groups. He's a founding member of ISOC St. Vincent. Some of the things that Nigel talked about, we're trying to encourage development of ISOC chapters across the region. Studied in the UK, where he extensively worked in the private sector, defense electronics and communications sector with Plessy GAC and ITTSTC Marine on a variety of novel microprocessor control system. Those diplomas in operation management, mechanical and production engineering from Northeast London University. Miss Ford, Ashel is an internet end user from Barbados. She's currently an ICT professional employed with the government's data processing department, but has worked in IT and telecoms regulation in Barbados and St. Vincent. In 2016, Ashel founded No to Online Abuse. No is with an exclamation mark. And Harassment, a registered charity which provides resources for victims of online abuse and education to students, PTAs, and community groups. She's a founding member of the Internet Society, ISOC Barbados chapter, where she has recently taken on the role of chairperson of the Barbados IGF Steering Committee. And of course, I have to tell you about Cecil. I've been following Cecil online. She's a pet turtle. And it's interesting to watch Cecil. So, welcome, all of them, to the floor. I'm going to cede now to Jacqueline, who's going to tell us about TTIGF processes, procedures, and outcomes. Jacqueline. I don't know if it works. It's on there.
Okay. Have my little slides. Okay, so basically I'm going to talk about the Trinidad and Tobago IGF, which was held on January 26th, 2017. So I'm going to go through really quickly what we did, why we did it, how we did it, and then get into the meat of it, which is our challenges, outcomes, and aspirations. So the inaugural TTIGF was January 26, 2017. The theme was the role of the internet and the digital economy in the sustainable development of Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah, it was kind of a big mouthful, but we wanted it to be, that was what our stakeholders suggested, so that's where we went. Yes, we had the distinction of being the first national IGF event in the English-speaking Caribbean, not in the Caribbean, because DR had theirs before. And we got a very enthusiastic audience, and we were live streamed, and there were a lot more people online than there were in the room, as often occurs. The convener was the TT MAG, as you heard, the Trinidad and Tobago Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Group, and leaders in the global internet governance community, including Cheng Tai, Lynn Sintamore, Marcus Kummer, who was closely involved with us in the working group on internet governance, and Marilyn Cade sent warm congratulations. The TT MAG is a registered not-for-profit organization, and its mission is to be an independent multi-stakeholder entity for the promotion and development of best practice policy standards for the .tt country code, top-level domain, and the local internet ecosystem in the interest of the internet community. So basically, our job as a multi-stakeholder organization is to work on these things for the benefit of all the stakeholders in the internet community in Trinidad and Tobago, and to whatever extent we can in the region. I can give you a quick little bit about the TT MAG. The TT MAG consists of members from the academic community, right now represented by the University of the West Indies and the University of Trinidad and Tobago, the business sector, the technical sector, civil society, which is represented by, well, Dev here is one of the representatives from the Rotary Club of Trinidad and Tobago, and we also have members from the IXP and government. How could I forget government? Yes, we do have representatives from government as well. There are two seats for each one of those stakeholder groups. Right now, we don't have that many members, but the idea is as we get more members in each of the stakeholder groups, they decide who their representative will be on the board of the TTMAG, and that will determine how we go ahead and what we do. So the idea is that it's truly multi-stakeholder, and it comes from the stakeholders up. I just happen to be one of the people who was there from the beginning. So with regard to the TTIGF 2017, financial and in-kind support came from the various member organizations of the TTMAG, which was ISOC, Trinidad and Tobago, the Trinidad and Tobago Coalition of Service Industries, Trinidad and Tobago Computer Society, the Trinidad and Tobago IXP, and the Trinidad and Tobago Network Information Center, which is the people from .TT, as well as the IEEE Trinidad and Tobago sector, ICANN, and the IGFSA. Our main session was a panel that focused on the role of the internet and digital economy in sustainable development of Trinidad and Tobago. Members included Professor Patrick Hossain, who is a director on behalf of the .TT of the TTNIC on the TTMAG, Dr. Kim Malaleo. I think everyone knows her name. She's a very prominent person in electrical and computer engineering and ICT in the Caribbean. Curly Prescott, who is the chairman of the Trinidad and Tobago Internet Exchange Company, and Kirk Sukram, executive officer from the Telecommunications Authority of Trinidad and Tobago, that's the regulator, the telecoms regulator. The main theme was broken down to the following sub-themes: the integration of ICT in the economy, role of government in embracing and promoting technology, net neutrality, e-payments and e-commerce, and the role of citizens and users in shaping the future of ICT and the internet in Trinidad and Tobago. These were the themes that were brought to us from an online consultation, discussions on various group mailing lists and so forth. The open forum brought up some more ideas, such as the challenges and opportunities that electronic payments present to Trinidad and Tobago's digital economy, network neutrality as it pertains to the local telecommunications landscape, creating a supportive culture for the next generation of digital entrepreneurs, open data as a driver of digital innovation, and management of generated electronic waste and sustainable development. These are some of the themes that we've been working on in the intersessional area. So we have discussion groups hosted by members of the TTMAG, most actively the one hosted by the Trinidad and Tobago Computer Society. And we also have discussion on the Trinidad and Tobago IGF website, where people are coming in and making comments and having discussions based on the themes that came up. And we're working to expand on that and update what has happened in the environment since January in our intersessional event in October 2017. And we are also working with our stakeholders, well, listening to the stakeholders, to come up with the themes for the 2018 TTIGF, which will be held in January 2018. Why did we decide to do a TTIGF in 2017? Well, as you heard from some of the things, a lot of us have been involved in IGF from the beginning. I was one of the people who helped come up with the idea of having an IGF, and then there are members such as Tracy Hackshaw, who has chaired and proposed multiple workshops in IGFs. He's been, I think, to almost all of them, and several other members. And so we realized that we've always wanted to do it, and we've been working on it for a long time. And the environment had finally matured enough for the country to have substantive discussion on IGC policy focused on local issues. And we had been ready to implement it for a while, but we decided to wait until the MAG was formally established to be a true multi-stakeholder host or convener of the event. And of course, stakeholders have been kind of chomping at the bit for a while. So we said, right, fine, 2017, that's it, we're ready to go. Why were we wanting to do it? The objectives were to focus the diffuse discussions. There's been a lot of discussion all around the place on internet-related issues, and we wanted to kind of focus them into one place so that we could get everyone working together and not just discussing in their own little silos. So we wanted to break down those and bring everyone together to have these discussions across the board, and to turn national intellectual resources to a short, medium, and long-term policy and strategy solutions. One of the issues that we have, Trinidad and Tobago, oil and gas, unfortunately, that really don't bring in the money anymore. So one of the things that the government and the nation has had to do is start looking at seriously. We've been talking about diversifying the economy for my entire life, but now it's absolutely necessary. And ICT is definitely one of the ways to do that. So now that people are ready to do it, we're bringing in all the resources together to focus on that sort of discussion. So there we go, to have stakeholders identify strategic elements needed in the transformation of Trinidad and Tobago from the oil and gas, 60-something% of our economy, to a more diverse one with digital economy playing a larger role in our economic basis. Challenges that we had, well, the nature of the IGF is such that it's independent, it's multi-stakeholder. When we started talking to people about funding us, we were looking for the notion of partnering. Yeah, give us some money, sure, we're a partner of yours, we're working on issues that support your goals and activities. However, a lot of the companies and organizations in Trinidad and Tobago believe in sponsorship. We give you money, we buy a piece of the space. And that is not the idea of the IGF. It's not one where you can sell a space so people can come and talk about their product or whatever, whether it's Microsoft or IBM. We don't want that. So we had to talk to quite a few people and try and change their mindset from, we're a sponsor, let's have our banners everywhere and we get to talk and advertise our product, to you're a partner in this and we are working towards something that's good for the nation and the region. It's not just about your company. We did have a few issues with logistics because the IGF is a free thing. And it being the first one, we weren't really sure how many people would turn up face-to-face and so on. We were well oversubscribed. We were sold out in like the first day. And so we had a lot of people online. Even local people who would have wanted to come couldn't get in because we didn't want to stretch ourselves and assume that we were going to have 300 people in the room and then find 30 and spend a lot of money, and waste it. There was an issue that the IGF is perceived as a talk shop, and some people aren't sure, why are we coming to talk about things? Hopefully, we think that during the event, they got the value of why we need to get together and discuss things with all the stakeholders and not just say, okay, let's go off and do this action, because we're very big on individual action. We're not very big. That's what people are accustomed to. The idea of getting together, policy is something that's seen for the government to do. And that's not where we are. So we have, I think with regard to the IGF, we've gotten people a lot more interested and a lot more understanding of the value of the other stakeholders in the environment coming together and working with the government, because it's not just the government's country, it's not the government's digital economy, it's not the government's internet, it's ours. So that's one of the things that we had to work on to help people understand this is why we're getting together. This is why we're having the IGF. It's not just here to talk and then we leave and nothing happens. And that's why the intersessional activities are so important, to keep the conversations going, for people to go out and do certain things and come back and say, right, now the environment has changed somewhat. Oops. Right, so outcomes. The first CTIGF fulfilled its intention, and this is where Carlton stole the text for me of being a catalyst for further dialogue, ideation, and action on critical internet governance issues. We achieved higher level discussion and longer term focus in national discussions on ICT and other issues. There was an increased interest in internet governance from many stakeholders, especially women's groups, girls in technology, and students, who had not previously thought that they had a role available to them in national policy development. There was an increased national focus on the integration of ICTs into everyday life and the issues arising from such. That is, things like Ashel has been working on, but there are some people in Trinidad and Tobago who've been working on similar things with regard to gender issues, with regard to online bullying, online sexual harassment, and so on. So there are a lot of groups that are now thinking, yeah, these are things that we can work on with regard to policy, and we can work on them together, yes, together, with other people who are not necessarily focused on the same thing that we are, but when you come down to the details, the policy that comes from it will affect us all, right? And increased visibility of internet governance in the national environment. There's been a lot more talk, a lot more focused interest and activity, not just in our group, but in all sorts of groups. And a lot of them are coming towards the IGF as a place to meet and network with others, and then maybe go off and do their own thing, but they're still feeding back into one focused area. So where we plan to go? Well, our aspirations are to support the development and implementation of the multi-stakeholder model in the Caribbean. Definitely. Anybody want to form a MAG? We have a little booklet, call me, I'll email it to you, we'll come, talk to you, whatever, and tell you how our experience and how it works. To support the development and implementation of NRIs in the Caribbean region, and to support the use of ICTs to transform the economy of Trinidad and Tobago in the post-oil and gas environment. You'll notice that we're looking to spread the gospel of multi-stakeholder and IGF first. And while we're doing that, nationally, we're going to help the country. And that is about it. Just letting you know, advertisement for TTIGF 2018. Tentative date is January 26, 2018. Carnival is early, so if you come, you will have fetes to go to and events. Just saying. And thank you very much. If you want to contact us, those are our number, those are our email address and website, or talk to Dev or myself. Can't miss us. And to contact the TTIGF, there's a website, or you can contact us via the TT Mag. And that's it.
Thank you, Jacqueline. We are going to hold the comments, questions until the third presenter. So we're going to have next Rudy. Rudy is going to tell us about the event in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Rudy Daniel.
Okay, is that better? Great. It's going to be slightly different. Since we have a new ISOC in St. Vincent, I'm going to give you some idea of the lead up and how we actually got to the point where we now have a new ISOC, and so we'll see where we go from here. Okay. So from civic to ISOC, I'm been working as an independent ICT for development consultant for many years. And living in St. Vincent, I'm happy to share my knowledge with both the government of St. Vincent and other stakeholders. So on that basis, I have been updating the government over the years. I really would like to compliment the region for having the civic virtual group, which has been going for perhaps the longest. It's the only virtual ICT stakeholders group that actually has been going for Carlton, how long has it been going? 13, 14 years? More than that. There you go. You know, it's amazing. Now, I've lived and worked in the UK for many, many years, and I came to St. Vincent and decided to stay. Doing various things, but I then joined Civic as a multi-stakeholder group concerned about internet governance and issues surrounding the internet at large. And it is fascinating that I met many, many people around the region since then. But Civic eventually led us all to ICANN. I think it was back in 2007. Many of us met up in Puerto Rico. And I think that was the start of, I also met Carlton there. I met Dev there. I met, I think it was just about everybody. Yes, yes. I think Mr. Daniels was there too. So we had Daniel and Daniels. Jackie was there. It really was a party. I really don't remember, you know, at the time I turned up there and I actually had an exam to do while I was there. So, you know, I was down on the floor, and then in the evening I was up in my room with a couple of guys trying to figure out if the computer's working, how we can get this exam done online, and it was great. But that was certainly my introduction to ICANN. And just before that, the introduction that a lot of us had to internet governance came from Diplo Foundation in Malta, which I think I should mention. Good, thank you. You see, it's great support, isn't it? Fantastic, yeah. So, you know, yes, it's great. So, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we have a population of 109,000. We have 150 square miles. Yes, we speak English. Although my accent is more Northern English European than Vincentian. But don't worry, we have our ISOC president here, so you can. Our major religion is Christianity. We have 2 ISPs at the moment, Cable and Wireless and Digicel. And we are part of ECTEL. We have an NTRC and Ministry of Telecommunications, which is now morphed into Ministry of Information, I believe. And Economic Planning, yes. So, what's happened? Aha. So yes, I was talking about the early road from Civic to ICANN. When I left the Puerto Rico, the ICANN meeting in Puerto Rico, I met Bernadette Lewis at the airport on the way out. And so that was my first introduction also to the CTU. I also met Nigel there. And that in itself moved me from Civic into the ICANN internet governance, into the CTU and the CIGF. I think I went to at least 3 IGFs. I think in the ABC Islands, in Curacao, there's 2. That was on the regional side. Back in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, I noticed that there was nobody in St. Vincent and the Grenadines who were sort of answering the regulatory commission in terms of public comments. So I decided to take that upon myself because I'm from the communications industry anyway. And I'd been through some similar things in Great Britain, when BT, British Telecom, lost its monopoly, and we as small businesses had to fight very, very hard to get certain things done, not unlike what we're going through in the ECTEL region presently. So I then contributed to public comments from, on the regulatory side. The ICT Advisory Committee. At some point, the government of St. Vincent and Grenadines recognized the fact that there was a regional ICT forum called CIVIC, and the minister at that time said to me, "Rudy, you always talking to me about the internet and regulation and stuff. Well, how about if I made you civil society representative for our ICT advisory forum?" So I said, it's entirely up to you, and that is what he did. However, that ICT advisory forum, which was really supposed to pull together all the ICT projects across the government spectrum and put them in one room where they can be discussed, because a lot of the ministries tended not to speak to each other. So it was disseminated information all over the place. But that committee did not really last very long. We didn't meet as often as we should have met, but it was a great idea. And it led to other things. That's the very most important thing. Also, around that time, moving on from that, St. Vincent and Grenadines wanted to have some e-commerce legislation. And yes, I was also invited as a civil society person who was interested in internet governance and to be on the select committee for the e-commerce legislation. I think that it was good vision of the government and the minister at that time to embrace the concept of civil society coming in. And but certainly at that time, the focus was on public sector governance of ICT. And I have to say that, in this region, I think up to now, and perhaps it's changing a little bit, but up to now, I think that when we hear of governance, people all tend to interpret it as government, but it's less and less so, and I hope we can sort of broaden that, moving on. Certain things happened around St. Vincent around that time too, in terms of the public sector and how they were looking at ICT. There was the HIPCAR project provided some guidelines for harmonized policies and legislation, largely led by the CTU and the ITU. Which is really supporting the Caribbean countries to improve their competitiveness by harmonizing approaches to ICT development. So that really began to pull together the concept of the multi-stakeholders, so governments, regulators, service providers, civil society. That was the talk, and that was great to see that, because that means that we were moving in the right direction. Later on, we had CARSIP, of course, which is the Regional Infrastructure Program, which began to deal with the cross-border infrastructure. And so, you have to start somewhere at the end of the day. You can't accomplish everything overnight. St. Vincent and Grenadines had an ICT strategy and action plan back in 2007, which it then modified, it developed into a strategy and action plan of 2010, 2015. And there on the board there, you can see that it was in line with the WSIS action line items focusing on infrastructure access, capacity building, economic development. And of course, SVG's strategy and plan was well timed to benefit this, the global emphasis being placed on ICT. Now, around also that time is that nationally we developed the national NCTI, which is really a training institution. It was, I think it was developed as a center of excellence for ICT. And it was really about access to end-user computer skills programs, you know, to provide the necessary ICT skills and certifications that should enable social inclusion. And so then we're seeing the language being developed here, you know. The government is talking about social inclusion, the narrowing of the digital divide, and allowing for meaningful participation in a globalized economy. And that's still very much being developed at the moment, and moving on. Our Center of Excellence, I think, was opened. This is the photograph of the then minister, Gerald Thompson. There you can see him, plus the gentleman there from the ITU, and the young lady at the front there. This was a time when St. Vincent and Grenadines was particularly interested in developing medical coding systems. And so it was all centered around sort of getting some kind of ICT data businesses going. So hence the young lady who's pictured, who's highlighted at the front, she was the manager of the medical coding operation. Yeah, I've taken this quotation from our strategy and action plan, just to indicate to you that, you know, it takes time to get somewhere, but it's good that you can recognize the language moving into it. And it's almost self-evident that unless stakeholders buy into the initiatives being implemented on their behalf, that investments in technology will be of limited value. It is therefore critical that stakeholder engagement be strengthened so that the programs and projects continue to be shaped to meet their aspirations towards their goals. And I'm focusing on the fact that here's a process where the public sector is beginning to understand where they need to go and who they need to pull in and to broaden the conversation. The new perspective is that we're enabling inclusion. We're having, the NTRCs are having a lot of town hall meetings to talk about ICT and ICT within the country as a whole. We have public sector I² competitions for people, for school leavers or people in school who want to do applications or apps or mobile apps. And there are some increased training initiatives going on presently. The NTRC collaborated with me in doing a civil society presentation of internet governance. And through that collaboration on that day, when I then went out and invited my Shernan from ISOC, I invited Albert Daniels from ICANN, and I invited Nigel from the CTU to come along and speak to us. And through that, at the end of that day, we decided en masse that we want to have an internet society, a national internet society. And so there it was proposed and formed, and we now have our president is sitting right here in the audience. And so that's fantastic. I mean, you know, it's taken a long time, and I'm so glad that Roxanne John is our president today. So my conclusion is that, you know, we have lots of new initiatives which are now embracing the ICANNs, the ISOCs, the CIGFs, the LACNICs as a country. And our new dimension is based on earlier efforts, which I've shown. So I'm quoting from our Prime Minister that says, we want a modern, competitive, knowledge-based, and smart society as we seek to support national development aspirations of all our people. So I would say that St. Vincent and Grenadines is currently demonstrating the willingness to step up and embrace the global multi-stakeholder governance framework in the continued creation of national policies and practices, in creating a truly collaborative national ecosystem, aiming to minimize the digital divide and enhance the creation of a knowledge economy across all sectors of the economy. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Rudy. So we're going to move quickly to Ms. Ford. Ashel, you're up.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Can I, oh, thank you. Can I have the presentation? Okay, so let's just get right into it. Barbados CIGF was June 21st to 23rd this year. The 21st was just an evening cocktail session opening ceremony. At this ceremony, we honored two people, Miss Bernadette Lewis of the CTU, who you would have heard about already, and Mr. Alan Emptage, who is a Barbadian who invented the first search engine, Archie. The techies in the room would know about that. The idea of having the opening ceremony was to invite persons who wouldn't sit through 2 days of meetings, but still engage them in this internet governance discussion, get them involved and excited and interested in what it is that we were doing here in Barbados for the first time. And because there were cabinet members there, we actually did get very good press coverage from the event, which was good. The forum itself was 2 days, and we have over 60 participants each day. We had a hard limit of 80 persons in the room, like it was a squeeze to get 80 persons in the room. So we had to cut off the registration, and but fortunately we were able to fit everybody who wanted to come. And then we also had an online audience. We used live stream, so it was difficult to actually gauge the number of individual online participants, but the statistic says that we have more than 3,000 unique views. Down below here on the bottom of the slide, we have some of the topics that we discussed. We did have capacity building, much like we did here yesterday with the internet governance ecosystem. Thank you, Bevel. We talked about increasing participation of Barbadians in global IG issues. We talked about the internet legislation, cybersecurity and cybercrime, the digital economy, and we had 2 sessions on internet activism. So, challenges. Shockingly, we had some difficulties. The first one was funding, of course. So, we eventually did have funding that was forthcoming from the government of Barbados, which did have a delegation, official delegation to the IGF. We were able to receive some funding from the private sector. A lot of tech companies did eventually come on board. And of course, we had the support of ISOC and the IGF Support Association. Because there are existing public-private partnerships with government having contracts with several local companies, we were able to leverage those partnerships to get those people involved both financially and in the actual discussions, which was great. But it was challenging. We experienced the same challenge as Jacqueline mentioned. You have to offer your sponsors value for their investment, and that's hard when you're trying to remain non-commercial. So you don't want to spend 2 days having your sponsors sell your audience stuff, because then that's not non-commercial. And I'd like to point out that that's one of the criteria to be recognized by the IGF Support Association. It has to be non-commercial. I felt that it was an interesting contrast. I participated in a lot of IGF remotely, and I don't remember what country the lady was from, but she talked about the government offering them a space to have their IGF, and they're going, no, 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 we don't want people to think that this is a government thing, so we'll get our own space. And I was like, why does that happen in Barbados? We had to pay for our space. It was heavily discounted, I will admit, because UE was one of the partners. But getting a space that was suitable, had the necessary technology, and was within our meager budget was difficult. The other challenge was the agenda. Like I said, you want to keep the agenda non-commercial as well, but also we want to cover a wide range of issues. And 2 days, it was hard to cover everything. Off the top of my head, we didn't cover OTT, over-the-top services. We didn't cover net neutrality, and I'm sure there are others. Even though we had a wide range of topics, we tried to keep the topics, each session, to about an hour, and it seemed that there was never enough time in sessions. There was always, we had to close the mic. There were other people who wanted to ask questions. We missed a question from the remote participants. So it was difficult in terms of time, because venue-wise, we weren't able to run concurrent sessions, and that's something that we might have to look into in the future, so that people who are interested in one topic but not interested in another, they can choose their session, and there's more time for discussion. We wanted to have lots of different speakers so that people weren't bored listening to me all the time speaking. But that means that there are a lot of additional kind of support people, and those contribute to your hospitality costs. You have to seat them, you have to feed them. So for instance, we had a hard cutoff of 80 participants, but that didn't include like the 30 people who we had either participating in panel discussions or giving workshops, that sort of thing. Lucky for us, some of these people are very busy and didn't spend a whole lot of time with us. Volunteers is an issue, because it's really difficult to maintain a group of people who are really, really engaged and really passionate about putting on these events and doing the work that is required. You end up with a small, very small group of people who have to do everything. And obviously that's difficult. Luckily for myself and Rodney Taylor, who's the chairperson of the Barbados chapter of ISOC, we work for the government of Barbados, who is a partner in this initiative. So it wasn't as if this entire undertaking was our extracurricular activity. We didn't go to work 9 to 5 and then had to do IGF stuff. It was part of our work, but everybody isn't that lucky. As it says here, people have jobs and families and hobbies, and planning an event has to work into that somewhere, so it's difficult. And then volunteer burnout. That has a question mark. Is it inevitable? Because, well, this is our first IGF. I'm not tired yet planning IGFs. But will that happen at some point in time? It's a thing that you can Google volunteer burnout, and it's a concern that we have going forward. Okay, so the report, like I said, because we discussed so many things, the report is quite extensive. It is currently pinned to the top of the Barbados chapter of ISOC's, so Internet Society Barbados chapter Facebook page. It's open for public comment now this week and next week before it's being officially published. There are a total of 12 recommendations, and I won't go through all of them, but these are the topics that they cover broadly here. For example, we are going to recommend to government that there is a component in the secondary school IT program that covers internet governance, how the DNS works, what ICANN does, what's an IR, that sort of thing. And we have enough capacity in the civil society groups in Barbados that if we can coordinate with the Ministry of Education, a person like myself can take a half a day to go to a school to teach that segment. right? We have that capacity. We also want to recommend that the Barbados Internet Governance Forum be given at least a 3-year mandate. It's really difficult to get something done in one day, and we don't want to fall into that trap of it was done once, it was great, and then nobody ever looked back at it again. But like I said, there are 12 recommendations. We would love your feedback on it. Again, the Internet Society Barbados chapter Facebook page, the report is pinned to the top of the page. And you can send your comments, questions, queries, whatever to info@igf.bb. So outcomes. Sorry. So another part of what we were able to accomplish with Barbados IGF is public awareness. We got really good press coverage, and internet governance is not something that the average Barbadian citizen had heard about before, and especially since it's so unfortunately named. I think Rudy mentioned it, when people hear governance, they think government, and for a lot of people, I think in my generation, that means that you automatically tune out. But we were able to engage a lot of people on social media because of the live stream as well, and because we also, as part of our marketing, pay for Facebook ads. So it was kind of in the realm of a lot of people who wouldn't have necessarily heard about internet governance before across a multitude of platforms. And we did get a lot of good feedback about people who said they hadn't heard about it, but it seemed really interesting. So we were able to pique their interest. The strategic partnerships were interesting because I know for a fact of at least one situation where some persons were trying to have a meeting with some multiple people in a group and were unable to do so for months and months. But all those people were at IGF, and they were able after IGF to have a subsequent meeting with those persons. And we can't discount the capacity building and how that we learned in how to actually coordinate and deliver an internet governance event. We had a lot of lessons learned, but we're going to get to that shortly. Okay, so the first thing we learned really was how much work this is. It's a lot to do, and there's lots of tiny details. And there are 2 suggestions that I wanted to make here. So if you don't remember anything else in my presentation, Mr. Kashmir, these are the 2 really, really important things. The first suggestion is that since we are on this journey to encourage national IGFs across the region, that we set up an IGF secretariat. Some entity that has the experience, that has the benefit, and it is your job, it's part of your mandate to make sure that these initiatives are successful, that they're organized properly, and to help fledgling chapters and organizing committees in getting this done. We share our lessons learned, and there's a focal point for that. We think that that would be incredibly helpful, especially if we can coordinate it so that there's a calendar of IGS across the region and everybody knows when they're going to be, and you can plan for them. Obviously, the topics will change based on the particular culture in a country, but we are not that different to each other in the Caribbean, and especially for the organization of the meeting, those things generally are not going to change too much. The next suggestion has to do with live streaming. This is really critical because of the large online participation that we had. A person may not be able to spend 2 days in your meeting, but you might have a 1 hour, 2 hour session that's really important to them. And they can sit at their desk at work and take part in that session. The live streaming is really critical, but it's also pretty challenging. I mean, we experienced that here yesterday where we had the issue with the internet. And I will be the first to admit that I underestimated what it would take to get a proper live stream done for Barbados IGF. We spent an entire day, what was supposed to be like a 1 hour site visit at our venue, trying to make sure that the live streaming was working, especially because we had a session that was a Zoom meeting across the Caribbean. We had a virtual town hall meeting with ISOC that Shernan chaired, and trying to get video from the room and audio from the room, plus the live stream, plus you have to decide, is that live stream going to be, how are we going to pipe it into the room and how are we going to do it online? And honestly, if not for all the technical help that we had from UE, from ISOC, and from people who had done this before, it would have been a disaster. And I think that because it's going to be so critical to all the national AGFs to use the expertise that we already have in the region, to have some kind of live stream kit that just travels around the region to the different meetings. Yes, obviously. Bible was saying that we also have to improve the internet, because a big part of the live streaming issue is when you have poor quality internet. But I can see how having the expertise in technical setup of the audio and the video would be incredibly useful. The other lesson learned was that we are not in this thing alone. We had a lot of support. And you can see here funding came from the IGF SA and the Internet Society. Our support from ISOC was amazing. They pushed through our request for a small grant, a Beyond the Net small grant specifically for IGF. We just had to fill out the form and it was done. We had expertise in terms of speakers from ARIN, from LACNIC, from ICANN, from ISOC, the Barbados chapter of the Information Systems Security Association. All of these experts were willing to come, sit on panels, sit in the audience, ask questions, share their experience. And we had technical support from ISOC, again for the live stream. Jolly McPhee is amazing. Without him, there's no way that we could have gotten that live stream done. And the technical staff at UE also really, really helped us out. Carrying on with the lessons learned, it was obvious how much the Barbadian public wants discourse on internet governance. When they are made to understand what internet governance is, they want to talk about it. They also want to be involved in changing the things that need to be changed. The business community in particular is really, really hungry to be involved in the legislative change that is hampering internet business and the internet economy in Barbados. The problem with that is multi-stakeholderism is not in our culture in the Caribbean. Governments do things. I mean, you hear this all across the world. People wait on government to do everything. And while that is partially true, there are things that no matter how much you agitate and how much you are willing to put in the work, you can't do. There are things that government has to do. And there needs to be a mechanism that says, okay, I have input because I am an expert or I'm a stakeholder. How does the government then take into account my experience and my expertise and my opinions and do the part that government needs to do? So, like changing legislation, right? Or enacting new legislation. And we need to find out we need to work on what that mechanism looks like. So in conclusion, there was consensus that the first annual Barbados IGF was a success. We learned a lot of things. We had a lot of lessons learned. And we now have 12 recommendations that we need to go forward and work on. I want to ask again that everybody have a look at the report, the final report for Barbados IGF. I am not going to lie, it's extensive, but there's an executive summary and especially conclusions so that we can get the community's feedback on the work that we did. So thank you, everybody. My contact information is here at the bottom. And questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Ashel, for that. I want to make a special shout out to Jolie McPhee. Jolie's probably listening now. I mean, he's a guy who's been there for us all the time. And more power to you, Jolie. We're going to I'm going to ask this panel to retire for a few minutes. And we have two pieces of business to do before we just wrap up. We have to hear from Kevin Swift from LACNIC. And we have an online, Lynn Centimore from the UNIGF is also waiting. So Kevin, and then we'll have Lynn coming online. Thank you. Straight to the podium. Let me tell you a little bit about Kevin. He's head of the Strategic Relations and Integration at LACNIC. Extensive knowledge of external relations and digital policy in the Caribbean. His background includes an MA in International Trade and Languages with postgraduate studies in international relationships, another MA in Internet Governance and Diplomacy, professional qualifications in Policy and Telecommunications Business. Kevin joined LACNIC in 2014. His work focuses on Internet governed processes, Caribbean affairs, and leading engagements with various Internet actors, including governments, international organizations, private sector entities, and the members of the LACNIC community. Kevin is the architect of LACNIC On the Move, an information campaign in Central America and the Caribbean that fosters bottom-up open dialogue on a wide range of Internet issues. He champions LACNIC's newest initiative called Líderes, which aims to bolster Internet governance spaces across the Latin American Caribbean region. Self-professed polyglot, and is interestingly more conversant in French than in Spanish, but will give his presentation in something resembling English on this occasion. Kevin Swift.
Thank you, Carlton. Voy a intentar. Someone asked me what's the effect of working in Spanish all day, and I really don't know what English really is anymore, but we'll see. So I'll try to be brief with my presentation. Of course, many of you who know me will know that my presentations usually set up as a bit of a straw man, because I think it's very important that the real discussion happens from the floor as opposed to me coming to this mic. So if we can get it up. This is an update on CIGF 10. Firstly, for those who are not aware as to what the CIGF is, it's the Regional Preparatory Meeting for Internet Governance, for the Internet Governance Forum of Latin America and the Caribbean. It started with 3 organizations coming together in 2008, LACNIC, the Association for Progressive Communications, which is an international civil society organization, and NUPEF, which is a research institute in Brazil. And they really wanted to identify priority areas for the upcoming IGF meeting, which in that year would have been Hyderabad, India. But what LAC-IGF really evolved into, it became a space to regionalize and to domesticate internet governance issues. And it really has become a legitimate space with a lot of global attention, because it really goes beyond just sensitizing people about what internet governance is. It helps people identify or put names to some of the things happening in their communities. And of course, once a year they come together and they share this in a 2 to 3 day event. There's a trust fund, which is very important in LAC-IGF, and I highlighted it there because the trust fund is something that LACNIC manages. It pulls together donations from several organizations. We have come a long way. I think Ashel was referring to the challenges Barbados has, Jacqueline as well. We have come a long way from working with private sector organizations and explaining to them this is not a question of sponsorship. There is no reward in terms of marketing and brand value. It's really a question of donations and understanding what the objective is, and the objective is strengthening governance and strengthening policy objectives and policy outcomes. So it's come a long way. This trust fund, it collects donations from over 10 organizations. It sponsors the venue and the logistics of the event, and it also goes towards another item on that list, the fellowships. The fellowships are very important. In as much as remote participation is available, fellowships are also very important, especially for newcomers, to understand the dynamics of an internet governance space and to also make important contacts and network at these events. Remote participation has been a consideration from the onset, and since 2011, we have started sponsoring 3 to 6 persons from the LAC space to attend the IGF, the global IGF. A bit more about the LAC-IGF. Here is the multi-stakeholder steering committee. You can consider it a MAG, as Jacqueline speaks about. However, you can anticipate the difficulties of trying to institutionalize or legally register a multi-stakeholder committee for a wide grouping of countries like this. We are not a multilateral institution in backing this initiative. It's really a multi-stakeholder activity from the onset. And here we have 4 interest groups, and among these interest groups, it goes up to 3 members. In the first row, the private sector associations, there's 1 member that has, there's currently 2 members. It could be 3. We have ASIET, which is the Inter-American Association for Telecommunication Companies. It's equivalent to CANTO in the Caribbean. You have ALAI, which is the Latin American Association for Internet, which is a public policy mover and thinker. We have the government reps, which are appointed by the ELAC coordination mechanism. Nigel mentioned on the first day that the ELAC is a digital plan for Latin America and the Caribbean, which is led by the UN ICLAC, based in Santiago, Chile, with sub-offices in Trinidad and Tobago. So the ELAC coordination mechanism chooses the government representatives. In this case, we have Chile, Mexico, and Uruguay. We have civil society organizations, the Association for Progressive Communications, the Association for Civil Rights, and of course, digital rights. And we have the technical community, Internet Society, ICANN, ALAC, TLD. What is important about these groupings, similar to what Jacqueline was mentioning, the steering committee and LACNIC as the secretariat does not get involved in who these members are. We do not predetermine who from civil society or who from a regional private association should be part of the steering committee. Each grouping is responsible for communicating, for outreach, and for selecting their members on a yearly basis. And one of the things that we do have oversight of as the Secretariat, upon instruction of the steering committee, we do open calls for hosting the event, open calls for topics for the event. There's a document that is circulated every year where anyone who's interested in this process can propose their topics, and then we tally the topics and the concurrence of similar topics. We have open calls for fellowships. We have open calls or reminders as to when each stakeholder group is hosting selections. So that's one of the things that we try to ensure to make sure that this is a really dynamic body that can get things done. And all of it is, of course, documented in a charter that explains what the LAC-IGF is, what the LAC-IGF Secretariat is responsible for, what the steering committee is responsible for. So when new members come on board, it is an easier learning curve to understand what are the roles that they're expected to play. LAC-IGF over the years. So as I said, the first started in 2008. We are coming down to Panama in 2017. And I wanted to highlight LAC-IGF 4, where we had an experience of collocating the LAC-IGF with the Caribbean IGF in Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago. It was a unique experience. It was an interesting experience. I was in and out and not really known at that time, and I think others may have had different feedback or different views on it. But one of the opinions I've heard is that there is a deep desire to come back to the Caribbean. So I won't mention who, what, where, why, but discussions have begun of possibly having LAC-IGF 11 in the Caribbean region. I think that's something very good for us to consider, having a LAC space with, well, having the C in the LAC space stand out and be a bit prominent. This year as well, and I think we're here on LAC-IGF 10, we had a record number of participation. By some counts, I think there were about 15 Caribbean people attending this year's LAC-IGF. I see Jacqueline, who was very present, Carlton, Deirdre, and I know I'm forgetting some other names and faces. Yes, Gary, of course, Melissa Richards from Guyana, Craig from Dominica, Talia. We had a huge Caribbean contingent there. We had our presence there, and I think we had our voices heard. But I would like for other folks to probably chime in on that afterwards. So looking at the evolution since LAC-IGF 1 to LAC-IGF 10, we see that really doubled the participation in the physical space. But one of the things I wanted to show you is that remote participation, that key consideration we had from the onset, it was standing at 15,000 people logging in at a particular time and staying on for, I can't remember the duration and what the exact metric is, but they logged on for a significant amount of time. and participated during the meeting. Sorry, 1,500. You see? Números, idioma is the same thing. We've moved on from 1 day to 3 days of sessions. We have had 85 panelists, 42 of them being women, 12 fellows, a huge representation across the region, 27 countries, 12 organizations. Yes. Yes, I should point this way. Thank you. Right. And the topics for this LAC IGF 10, which was in Panama in the start of August, we covered a lot of issues. If we were to go back to Nigel's explanations of the internet layers, you would see that a lot of them touch on that top layer, the content and applications, information society issues, digital economy, data protection. We have access, which tends to still be something that is recurrent. The easy part is done, access to people in cities, that is well covered across the Latin American and Caribbean region, but of course, we still have challenges when it deals with rural communities, remote communities, and otherwise. We have security, which cuts across all of the layers, and then we had a special session looking at NRIs and the role they play, the Panamanian outlook on internet 5 years ahead, and looking at how we look at governance and ensuring that there is more fruitful participation, not only vertically. What I mean by that is not only along the internet industry, but ensuring that it goes across economies and societies, trade people, agriculture people, etc. So these are the prevalent trends that came out of these discussions. The trend of inclusion, gender inclusion, tended to be a recurrent topic, a recurrent point during LAC IGF 10. Indigenous inclusion, rural inclusion. We also spoke about inclusion of the private sector, telcos, in a real fashion, not only in a commercial sense, but understanding what role they play in policy formulation. We spoke about governance innovation. This means that we are not just going to import governance structures and practices from outside. We need to understand what we are doing. We need to understand the objectives of coming together, of having a forum, of having a mechanism, and therefore tailoring that encounter and tailoring that process to what our realities are. We spoke about enhanced cooperation. I sort of mentioned that a bit with the multi-sectorial focus. We spoke about smart regulation. And smart regulation where you do not over-regulate. There's a tendency of over-regulating something that is unknown. There's a tendency of saying that government does regulation and then there's nothing else that goes into there. Smart regulation is really premised on the multi-stakeholder model and is being appropriate, fit for purpose, etc. And then NRIs and strengthening governance systems. One of the things that is important to explain about NRIs right now, the national initiatives are not hierarchical and do not therefore need to depend or feed on the regional initiatives and the global initiative. Internet governance, pretty much like the architecture of the internet, is a distributed network. And the main principle involved here is something called subsidiarity, where a problem occurs, locate the actors nearest to the problem and solve the problem there. Of course, one of the important things of following the other levels is seeing that where you have conversions of ideas, is seeing where you have similarities, it's understanding where you need to put the emphasis and where you need to put the emphasis in the internet governance ecosystem. I also like to compare this way of navigating the internet governance ecosystem as a song by Kenny Rogers called The Gambler. You really need to know when to hold them, when to fold them. And that's exactly what we need to do with internet governance, especially with your national spaces. Your national spaces are where you should be intimate and do not be very concerned about the concepts that you don't understand. It's where you ask about those concepts and you come up with a definition in the room about those concepts that may not be very clear to you. One of them may be multi-stakeholder. What does that mean? But that's another debate. So some of the remaining challenges that had been identified through the CIGF process, and in particular the event this year, is that there needs to be more attention to the content of dialogues and generating discussions. There's a lot of emphasis and a lot of attention paid to the perfect panels. The panels must look like the United Nations or the United Colors of Benetton. It must be appropriate with all representativity under the sun. And when we do that at times, we drift away from that subsidiarity principle. It really needs to go back to what the issue is, who are the people who are directly related to the issue and how best they can address it, and still be inclusive. But you should not do one in detriment to the other. You need to be inclusive, but you need to also be precise. And I would say very openly, and this is not my personal criticism, but the panel is really dying a slow death. The panel is useful for when you have new ideas, new concepts, and you really need to aerate that new idea in a community among some high-ranking experts. There are some of these issues that each one of us in this room have part of a solution to, and we should therefore look to other formats in which you could come together and come up collectively with a solution. So the panel is really dead. I mean, I think this has also been seen at the global level where there are new formats that have come up and new recommendations on how groups should propose workshops at the global IGF. When it comes to capturing outputs, that's also a concern within CIGF. At present, we have reports, we have videos, but we need to do more. When it comes to intersessional work, we need to understand it's much more about the journey than the destination. So let's not consider CIGF just as this 3-day event in a Latin American or Caribbean destination. It's really about what happens in between that. And I'm not going to say working groups across the region because that's another issue. We know that working groups across the regions are somewhat problematic. But we need to be engineers here. And in the Caribbean, we are engineers. We need to look at financial resources and sustainability. In the same way we are able to reach to 10 organizations who give donations to the CIGF, we need to be able to also mix it up and get new organizations on board, anticipating the day that the existing ones may no longer be in a position to give the support that they have been giving before. So that sustainability factor is an ongoing concern. And of course, when it comes to selecting fellows and when there's high demand, understanding very well what the criteria is and applying that criteria is one of the concerns that CIGF has identified. So I will leave you with that. I know there are many other views, many other things that could be said, but I would like to pass the session back over to Carlton, who can open up the questions, answers, and comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kevin. Before we go to the questions, and we want to bring in Lynn Centimore. She's going to be remote, so she's coming in online. Lynn, as you know, has been formerly CEO of ISOC. She's now the chair of the UN's MAG grouping. We welcome Lynn back to the CIFG. Lynn, you have the floor. And I will tell you that we're going to run about 10-15 minutes over time for this session. So stick around.
Thank you, Carlton. If the voice should be a problem, if you could just break in and let me know, that would be appreciated. I just want to try and hit a couple of key points, both about and from the IGF, trying to focus on some of the intersects of possible interest. The IGF, as I'm sure many of you know, is very, very broad. There are over 200 sessions, over 40 open forums, over 40 booths in the village. So there's an awful lot of activity to cover. The 11th IGF was held last December in Zapopan, Jalisco, Mexico. And the meeting was the first IGF since the renewal of the IGF's mandate for 10 years by the United Nations General Assembly late in 2015. 10 years was a significant marker or indicator for the success of the IGF, as the two previous periods were both only for 5 years. So the overall theme for IGF 2016 was enabling inclusive and sustainable growth, and many of those topics carry over to this year, and in fact have been present in each year of the IGF. In 2017, we took a slightly different approach, and the arching theme is Shape Your Digital Future. This is really recognizing that we're trying to reach out very significantly and both broaden and deepen engagement, not only in the IGF, but in the intersessional activities. And of course, the NRIs are a key piece of this, while obviously continue to recognize their autonomy. And just to be clear, I fully agree and support the previous speaker's comments with respect to how the NRIs were represented. And it's something we try and pay kind of great attention to, while also hoping to kind of deepen the collaborative relationship between all the parties. So again, in 2017, the IGF will be hosted by the government of Switzerland. It's in late December, 18th to the 21st, and it is on the Geneva premises of the United Nations, and will give us a unique opportunity given the hub of international intergovernmental organizations that are there. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about the IGF itself and its programs and intersessional activities, and then a little bit about the MAG and the community and what we're working towards the IGF's evolution, given we're still so early in this second decade of the IGF. So the IGF was created as one of the major outcomes of the WSIS process, and the IGF and the IGF community strive to ensure that in addition to being the platform for multi-stakeholder policy dialogue, the IGF also facilitates implementation of all the agreed WSIS action lines, including but not limited to C1, the role of public governance authorities and all stakeholders in the promotion of ICTs for development, C4, capacity building, and C11, international and regional cooperation. I'm sure I don't need to say anything about the importance of ICTs in all of our lives, and obviously the increasing prevalence and necessity. So many of the IGF intercessional work is directly supportive of those action lines. All the best practice forums, the Connecting Enabling the Next Billions 3, which I'll talk about in a minute or two. And the Caribbean community can use all those intercessional activities as a direct channel to share your perspectives globally and certainly enrich those efforts and hopefully find points of value that you can bring back to your own communities. So the engagement and participation of governments and policymakers increased significantly last year in the IGF itself, as well as with far more open forum sessions held than in any previous IGF. The open forums are a session type which is reserved for governments, IGOs, and relevant international organizations, and included numerous governments, as well as the African Union, European Commission, Organization of American States, the OAS, obviously, and OECD. I hope that phone is not too irritating. This year, we are expecting even more open forums given the location, and we'll probably move to somewhere above 40. We still need more participation from policymakers in the private sector in particular, and there are a number of efforts that are taking place throughout the MAG and some working groups to try and increase participation from those actors. So IGF and IGF initiatives, the NRIs, emphasize international cooperation and strategic partnerships to help bridge digital divides and provide crucial new opportunities for people to address economic, social, and other developmental areas specific to the use of ICTs and the internet. In addition to the SDGs, the WSIS action lines call, amongst other things, for a multi-stakeholder approach to promoting ICTs for development, as well as to international and regional cooperation. And the IGF and the NRI relationship is a key enabler of so many of those important objectives. So it's important to look into internet governance issues on the local levels. Previous speaker mentioned subsidiarity. This is a key instance, a key factor. It helps to understand what are the specificities and issues at local levels, and it enables everyone to work together to come up with the best solutions for those specific environments. This is why the NRIs are critically important, because through their communities, they bring inputs on what are the relevant issues and then work to develop potential solutions, and then are able to share that with a broader and global audience. One tangible way for the IGF to enhance and increase the participation of developing countries, which is a key goal, is through the national, regional, and youth IGF initiatives. And as you know, they've been emerging spontaneously ever since the IGF was called for in the Tunis agenda. The NRIs are active and immensely useful contributors, locally, of course, but also to the IGF and the intersessional activities. The linkages between the NRIs and the global IGF have increased significantly thanks to many joint work activities, as well as to the organization of a number of sessions held during the last IGF and continuing on to the IGF later this year. There's a lot of collaborative work on developing publications containing guidelines and best practices on how to establish and run a successful NRI. And importantly, records from the NRI's regular fortnightly meetings, these are the meetings that are held across all the NRIs, also serve as very valuable and tangible inputs to the global IGF, providing more local and issue-specific perspectives to policy challenges. NRIs have actually been a very notable success within the IGF sphere. The number of national, regional, and youth IGFs rose from 37 in 2015 to 72 in 2016, nearly doubled, and they're at 95 today. There are 64 national IGFs and 7 more nationals in formation, 16 regional IGFs, and 8 youth IGFs. They've all contributed to building a very effective network for sharing information and experience. And certainly CICG has recognized this as well in your commitment to enhancing IG expertise and capacity at the local level, specifically, in your own words, to accelerate the development of national multi-stakeholder structures to facilitate in-country implementation of regionally derived harmonized activities. So clearly that's further evidence of the importance of NRIs and their contributions, and is an area the MAG is putting considerable effort into as well this year. Just moving quickly to the IGF's evolution. Resolution 70/125, which is the General Assembly resolution that extended the existing mandate of the IGF for a further 10 years, recognized that the forum should continue to show progress on working modalities and the participation of relevant stakeholders from developing countries. That guides the MAG's work, as well as the recommendations from Commission on Science and Technology, CIGF, who had previously had a working group on improvements to the IGF. So in all of our work, we follow closely the recommendations of the CSTD working group. We follow closely all of the taking stock activities that take place across the IGF set of activities, and use that to try and identify further areas for improvement or natural evolution in some instances. Specifically, the CSTD Working Group on Improvements called to increase and improve tangible outcomes of IGF meetings. And I think Jacqueline spoke to that earlier this morning as well. They also asked us to focus on the working modalities of intersessional work of the IGF, including open consultations, the MAG and the Secretariat's functionings, and the funding of the IGF, which frankly continues to be a problem to this day. They also asked that we broaden participation in capacity building and that we work to link the IGF to other internet governance related entities. And there's some level of activity occurring across all of those activities. In fact, we report out a couple of times a year to the CSTD on progress against those recommendations. So we've specifically, we developed and implemented things such as the open forum sessions, which I mentioned just a few minutes ago. And that was to explore activities from particular governments or organizations. We began a major policy program through intersessional work for connecting and enabling the next billions, and are in our 3rd year for that activity now. Best practice forums were a result of looking at some of the areas for improvement in the IGF as a result of the CSTD recommendations. We looked at new modalities for the multi-stakeholder dynamic coalitions, and we also looked at new session formats. In addition, last year, a newcomers track was introduced to facilitate engagement by new participants, and that is continuing and in fact being extended this year. So in 2016, the IGF furthered its work on policy options for connecting enabling the next billions, or CENB as it's known. Last year, it focused on local and regional specificities to enable meaningful access. It also investigated how ensuring meaningful internet access can support the UN SDGs. Phase 3 builds on the IGF community's work on this topic over the past 2 years on the theme of promoting meaningful access. And in 2017, the recommendation is to focus on a limited number of SDGs that are impacted by ICTs and to do a deep dive in collecting and analyzing case studies worldwide that approach a complete phase 1 and 2 with concrete local experiences. The proposed SDGs that we would focus on are goals 4, 5, and 9. 4 ensures inclusive and quality education for all and promotes lifelong learning. 5 is achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. And goal 9 is to build resilient infrastructure, promote sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. The IGF community contributions will build these case studies and success stories. And notably, there's an important role for the national and IGFs to play, again, where it intersects with your own activities, your own interests. The BPFs offer unique platforms to investigate topical internet policy challenges by collecting community input and experiences in a flexible and bottom-up manner. They gather knowledge that exists with different groups, experts, or individuals, and makes it available as a useful resource to the broader community in the form of tangible best practice outcome documents. In 2017, we have 3, one on cybersecurity, another on local content, and one on gender and access. EPFs work throughout the year in an open and inclusive way via open mailing lists, regular virtual meetings, and workshops during the IGF meetings. In 2016, for the first time in the IGF workshop proposal process, proposers were invited to define their workshops with thematic tags, including allowing write-in tags. And that would allow us to structure the IGF program in a bottom-up way. The most popular tags were then used to determine the sub-themes for the 2016 meeting, and we will be using the same process for the 2017 meeting later this year. That process last year saw the inclusion of youth issues and sustainable development as new discrete sub-themes, while joining, of course, many of the returning sub-themes such as cybersecurity, gender, internet and ICTs for development, human rights, freedom of expression, internet economy, access and diversity, multi-stakeholderism, etc. There was one new one for 2017. There were quite a few submissions on artificial intelligence, or what's sometimes called algorithmic decision-making. And I have to say that all those themes, both the returning themes, seem to reflect quite well the strategic areas you've identified in your policy framework. And again, I think that's not by accident. It is through the increased participation from the NRIs, and I'd like to think some of the processes we put in place to actually open up the channels between the MAG and the NRIs themselves. So last year, we also introduced new session types in the program, including some lightning and unconference sessions, and these efforts continue. There were 6 main sessions included in this year's program, or will be. One is gender inclusion and the future of the internet. Second one is creating an inclusive workforce in the digital economy. A third one is empowering global cooperation on cybersecurity for sustainable development and peace. You can certainly tell that title was a committee title. And the last one is local interventions, global impacts. How can international multi-stakeholder cooperation address internet disruptions, encryption, and data flows? So basically, 4 of the main sessions are focused on, one on gender, one digital economy, one cybersecurity, and the other one on a fairly deep sort of technical matter. There are also 2 other sessions, a main session totally organized by the NRIs and dedicated to topics of their choice. And there's a second main session organized around the dynamic coalitions with the connecting and enabling the next billions policy project. I am coming to the end here in a moment. I do think it's important to highlight just some of these larger activities, give everybody a flavor of the sort of breadth of things we're doing, and hopefully encourage you to participate in them. So we also have 5 working groups which are established this year. They are MAG working groups. A number of them are open to community members as well. There are some on communication and outreach, the workshop review and evaluation process, one on new session formats. The 2 that I think that are the most interesting are 2 new ones. One is a working group on IGF improvements. I mentioned some of the CSTD and in fact the UN General Assembly resolution, which called for us to focus on improvements in some specific areas. There was also a retreat, a 2 or 3 day retreat that was organized last year by Department of Economic and Social Affairs in the UN that pulled from across all the stakeholders. And there was an awful lot of good ideas and good suggestions to come out of that retreat as well. And that's also being included in this working group on IGF improvements. And then finally, there's another one on working group on multi-year strategic work program. This basically recognizes the fact that many of the efforts that we start, whether it's through intercessional work or frankly, even through an IGF specific meeting activity, do tend to have multiple years. The more critical or the more nuanced, the more difficult issues, of course, stay with us for quite a number of years. And at every year, the MAG was sort of resetting its sort of work objectives, if you will. And frankly, there was an awful lot lost in one year as we transition to the next. So we're hoping to lay out a 2 to 3 year work program that recognizes the complexity and the duration of some of the challenges in front of us, and actually establish work that allows a much smoother and continuous set of activities. So as I said in my comments earlier this morning, the Internet's development and internet governance activities should be guided through equal and meaningful participation of all stakeholders across the world. And those are 2 tremendous words, equal and meaningful, with their own set of challenges. But it's imperative that we do that. And it's also imperative that we increase participation of stakeholders from all the countries and regions, and particularly from the developing world. It's one of the reasons why we're so keen in doing everything we can to support the national and regional IGF initiatives. As it's central to that effort, you are all important and crucial collaborators. And frankly, it's where change happens, is on the ground. So anything we can do to better support those activities, we're interested in hearing any and all ideas and suggestions. So in closing, I am the IGF Secretariat, and I mean, I have to give a big shout out to Anya Genko, the Special Coordinator for Special Focal Point for NRIs in the Secretariat. I think she does a tremendous job. She seems to be online 24 hours a day. And I know she would join me, as well as the other staff in the Secretariat, in thanking the Caribbean IGF for being such a long-standing and regular contributor to the NRI's network. We're really happy to see the advent of so many national IGF initiatives as well. And I certainly hope I've done much to encourage further participation in the IGF 2017 in Geneva and all its intercessional activities. And again, if there are any questions here or even online, I think most people have my email address. If not, it's easy enough to get through the facilitators there. I'd be happy to answer any specific questions or help direct you to an appropriate place as appropriate. Thank you very much for allowing me to participate remotely. And Carlton, thank you for facilitating this session.
Thank you, Lynn. So I hope you give us a little forbearance here. This session was a long one, but I thought it was important for you to hear all of the speakers fully. I'm sure you learned something from all of them. I would now invite question, comments Against all of the speakers, you can make a comment. I see Albert's hand up. Albert, you have the floor. Please make it as brief as possible.
Thank you very much, Carlton. The question is to the members on the first panel and maybe others who wish to comment, and relates to the stakeholder journey. I think most of you've done your national events and you've spoken about creating awareness. Now, the next step on the stakeholder journey is getting these volunteers before, the volunteer burnout to get involved actively in policy development. So, and I know some of you are very experienced in that area. So the question, really what I'm asking is, what are your thoughts on how we get to the next step? What are your suggestions? What would you say to international organizations like ICANN about what we can do to get more volunteers involved in the next stage of the stakeholder journey?
Thank you, Albert. Anybody from the first panel? Jacqueline, Ashel, Rudy, you have a first go at answering Albert. Jacqueline? Where's Rudy? Rudy's going to have a go.
Yes, I'll have a go. Yeah. It's all about finding people who have or want to have the right agendas, I think. I would say that, it took me years to actually find people who were interested in going to an ICANN meeting, because ICANN was so far away from what they knew, I mean, recently it's gotten a little better. People have gone to, but sometimes people don't even sort of contemplate, they're so wrapped up in their sort of local, regional thing, they don't even know that these outreaches exist, So a major part of it is really going out and, should we say, carefully communicating to interest groups, I think, not just but interest groups, I think really does help. And as I move down the line, I've learned quite a bit, because I contribute, on a local level, I tend to allow locals to take whatever knowledge that they want, and then on a regional kind of level, or I participate and learn where I can, from say a working group, or Arian on the policy side, So I try to sort of try different aspects, and so I've learned a bit along the way, and I think it's really finding the interest groups that you can sort of lock into, and But I think Jackie has another perspective.
Hi, Jacqueline Morris. One of the things that we've been doing a lot, not just as a MAG, as a TT MAG, or as IGF, but in the ICANN space itself, as an ALS in the Lac Rala region, is we look at what is going on in internet governance, for example, in ICANN. We break it down. We look at all the people that we're working with, that we're networking with, that we're connected to, and what their interests are. We align those and we direct, because there's so much going on. You don't want to have somebody just jump into a big ocean of things. You need to say, you have this particular interest. This is what is interesting and exciting to you. This is what you want to spend your time in. This here in ICANN, or in internet governance, or in ARIN, or wherever it is, this here, participation in this can help you get to your goal. And when you spend the time to connect people carefully and correctly to the interests that they have, then it works. And you've seen how it works with, we've got a lot of people from the Trinidad and Tobago Computer Society participating in ICANN. The ones who weren't interested in ICANN, or the ones like me who got exhausted from the ICANN work, you'll notice that we've moved them into other areas that interest them. So that's how we're managing to expand into putting people in different things. And the working groups especially are an easy way to do that because there's so many working groups on so many themes. You must be able to find some working
Yes,
group
Jackie, we
somewhere
need to
that somebody be interested
close
in.
it up. Let's, there was a question from TT Hub, and it says, it's asked, how do you go about avoiding capture in a multi-stakeholder group like TT Mag? That was a question from avoid capture. Well, anybody can answer that. It's capture. Capture, I presume, means that one group becoming prima inter pares, first among equals.
Okay. What really happens with regard to capture, and that is something that has been a concern in civil society organizations in particular, and it came into multi-stakeholder organizations via the WSIS. And what that means, what capture is that one group, as you said, becomes more powerful than the other groups, usually by packing the place with more and more of their members. So you have to design a structure in which the number of members that somebody has does not overwhelm, unlike in Lacrallo, that's one of the issues that's going on there, so that having more and more members from one group doesn't overwhelm the balance. And what happens a lot of times is people say, well, we're the majority of people in this group, and so we should have more say. One of the ways to do that is exactly how MAGs are created. You have area, you have 2 people or 3 people per stakeholder group. And that's it. If you've got 1,000 businesses, they still have 2 seats. If you've got, where there's one government, they have 2 seats. 1,000 businesses, 500 civil society actors, 2 seats. They can fight them among themselves, but the number of 2 seats around the board means that it stays balanced. And very importantly, you have to have, if you want to take over and change the bylaws to allow one group to have more power, you have to get other groups to help you, because changing bylaws requires something like 75% of the directors to change it. Those are some of the
Super majorities, yes. There's another from the hub. You want to read it? Oh, you don't have it here. I was told there was another question from the hub. Yes, the hub. Could you just...
From ISOC St. Vincent and the Grenadines. There are 3 questions. First one, as it relates to education on IG and IG issues, how can local actors access funding, key resources to effectively keep this going? Question 2, within Latin America and the Caribbean, how big or loud would our voice as a region be in the global context of IG? And the third question, Gary advised that this will be addressed tomorrow in the workshop. The question, I'll still read the question anyway. What are the key objectives that we want to see achieved on the global scale as a region, which is Latin America and the Caribbean, as it relates to IG?
So let me take a stab just to get it answering the first one about the funding. If you recall from the Ashel's presentation, she identified some sources of funding, but there also a recommendation and emphasis that internal fundraising is also important to that. So you have ISOC will be able to give some funding, IGFSA gives some funding, and the ICANN and so on giving funding for IG activities. That's the first one. And the second one is about the voice. How do you amplify the voice in the internet space? Well, my own view is about it's a collaborative effort, and that comes from my experience. When we started, those of us in the first wave in the IG space, especially in ICANN, we were punching above weight because we collaborated with each other. I mean, there was Tracy, there was Jacqueline, there was Lance, there was myself, there was Dev. We always supported each other and collaborated. Everybody, Dev, if there was an issue that we didn't know and Dev could not find it for us, we were hosed. That was probably the best researcher you could find. And there was always a back channel. We established back channels, so even if Jacqueline was sitting up there as the chair of the ELAC, Lance and I was sitting in the room, and we were third and fourth year for her to get issues to her and pass information to her. It's the same way with Tracy. She is vice chair of the GAC, and we did the same thing. We showed up and we assisted, we helped. So it's a collaborative effort that will amplify the Caribbean voice in IG activities. We've done it before, and we can do it again. The only point is that we have to collaborate across the region and build capacity and help each other. That's the way to go. With respect to the third question, and that we will deal with that a little later, but I see Ashel want to say something, and then Kevin.
My comment is with regard to the first question with funding for IG education. So I know there's funding that's required to travel to meetings. You need funding to have local IG events. But the question specifically asks about education. And you don't always have to spend a lot of money to educate people, right? And I think that's something that's really important to note. We have IG experience, sometimes years and years of experience within our own communities, right? Carlton is in Jamaica, and Jacqueline and Dev in Trinidad, and all across the region. We have the expertise in-house. And sometimes we need to get away from everything from outside is better, and every person from outside, knows better than us. That is not always the case. And even when it is the case, Aaron, LACNIC, ISOC, they're always, in my experience, willing to send the expertise. The persons from these organizations that participated in Barbados IGF, we did not support their travel and their participation in BIGF. These organizations sponsor us in expertise by allowing their representatives to come and share their knowledge with us. So it's not, I just want to point out that it's not always that you have to spend a ton of money to educate people who are now trying to get into the IG space.
Excellent, thank you, Ashel. Kevin.
Thanks, Carlton. I really wanted to speak to the second question. I think it dealt with the lack voices in the global space. One of the things I don't think we are aware of here in the Caribbean is that some of the similar challenges we have here in the Caribbean to make ourselves known, to punch above the belt, it really is very similar to what happens in Latin America. You do find, in terms of regions across the world, when it comes to internet governance issues, that Latin America and the Caribbean tends to be at the trail of that level of interaction. Case in point would be the process dealing with the review of the IANA functions, but I'm not going to go into that. So something that initially came up, and it's much aligned to what Carlton was talking about Jacqueline and Dev for the, what spheres were there, the ICANN work? In the first wave. In the first wave. It's much aligned. There is a recent Google group called LAC IGF Space. And it's a Google group where it's simply that. It's not an onerous mechanism. It's the same concept as Carlton was explaining, passing tips along when someone's in a place that you are able to coordinate in the background. And you'll be surprised how many coordinators of national initiatives in Latin America. I will specifically name here Renata from Brazil, yes. Renata Aquino from Brazil, yes. Nacho, Miguel Estrada from Argentina. These are people who are very much keen on working with the Caribbean and ensuring that no one is left behind when it comes to what LAC needs and what LAC wants to voice in the scheme of global internet governance. So I think it's really important that we take use of these opportunities. This is a space that is operating in both languages, Spanish and English in the region. Renata agrees to work in either of them. But there is a real strong want to be inclusive, and therefore we should not shut ourselves out to that simply because someone speaks another language.
Yes, excellent. Well said. Yes, Gary.
We have the Barbados Hub who would like to make some comments remotely.
Is he coming in remotely?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, sir. Oh, Rodney. Howdy.
I'm doing well, Carlton. Good morning and greetings from the Barbados Hub. There are 7 participants here following the discussion actively. And we want to thank you for acknowledging us and for giving us the opportunity to present our comments. I also want to thank Ashel for doing an excellent job at representing us there in the forum, and also for successfully chairing our first Internet Governance Forum. My comment relates to the scheduling of the national IGFs. From a practical perspective, I think it would be useful for us not to be tripping over each other, but to have these events scheduled in such a way that it allows us to participate in each other's activities. So logically, there should be national IGFs, which should lead to the regional IGF, and what I refer to as the extra regional IGF, which is LAC IGF, and then the Global Forum. This may be a challenge, I understand, but it would help us to filter the discussion as we go forward to the Global Forum with a regional agenda and talking points, and we would be in a better position to support each other, as I mentioned, as is done in other diplomatic processes like the United Nations, ITU, WTO, etc. The same applies for the ICANN and ARIN and LACNIC processes. I think that we need to be more strategic in how we develop how we streamline our issues and how we filter them, so that when we go to these meetings, we have our talking points in hand. On that note, I would like to know to what extent the regional policy framework developed by the CTU is used to guide those that represent the region within the global forums, such as the LAC, the GSC and ICANN, and the International IGF Forum. To what extent does that policy framework inform those persons who attend? And then on another note, to what extent does the CTU plan to incorporate the national IGFs in the further development of that document, so that we have a greater sense of ownership within that policy framework and also within the regional process? With respect to LAC IGF, I had the opportunity to attend in Panama, and I am appreciative of the effort of Kevon Swift in having some Caribbean representation in the panels. I think that we need to have more of that, and in terms of developing the agenda as well going forward, that we need to have our voices heard, so that we create a real ecosystem, internet governance ecosystem, where the Caribbean is playing an active part. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rodney. Most of you probably know Rodney. We go way back. Rodney is, as Ashel said, chairman. But one of the things that Ashel just to connect the dots here, you see Rodney is all about cooperation and collaboration. And then there's a mechanism to effect those outcomes. And one of the things that was recommended from Ashel's presentation was the regional IGF secretariat, which would help in enhancing the cooperation and the messaging for Caribbean issues in the global space. So that is one big thing. The other thing that Rodney mentioned is more participation in the development of the agenda, whether it is the Caribbean agenda that is being managed by the CTU, or the LAC IGF agenda that is managed by LACNIC. And of course, again, it's about participation in the advisory group, participation in the multi-stakeholder groupings. I am fully endorsing Rodney's comments. Those are very useful indeed. Thank you, Rodney. Any other question? Yes, Deirdre. Oh, I'm sorry, Deirdre. Deirdre is on.
Is it work? Yeah? Yes, Deirdre Williams from St. Lucia. I did a lousy job of introducing myself yesterday. I should have said that I am the civil society representative on behalf of Civic on the CTU's Caribbean ICT Collaboration Committee, which was set up last December. And as I am the only civil society member, but my working group, of which I am chair, has all of the working groups have been opened up. So I will be looking for other people who will come and help, not necessarily civil society people, people who volunteer with the intention of doing what they volunteer for. With me, that's a very hard spot at the moment. In the matter of education, I think we need to teach people to educate themselves. It's not our responsibility to go around and arrange workshops for them. It's our responsibility to tell them where the information is so that they can go and do it themselves. About having a voice, you have to have courage, and it is very difficult. In the IGF at Sharm el-Sheikh in 2009, at one of the first sessions, they had people from all over the world presenting their IGFs, and Bernadette hadn't managed to come. And I thought, no, I can't let them not say the Caribbean IGF. So I put my hand up, and Marcus Kummer saw it, which was great because he'd actually closed the mic, and he let me speak. I sweated, I nearly cried, my mouth dried up, but I said it. And once you've done it once, you can do it again. So people in here who are just at the beginning, the first time is the worst time. After that, it gets a lot easier. You should join Civic if you want to know more about internet governance. If you don't find the information there, you'll find people who help you. Yassine Keladi has done a wonderful job for about 14 years moderating Civic. Balance and trust. If you're going out there to represent people, do what you say that you're going to. Have people to trust you. That's very, very important. But the Caribbean can get out there. For 2 years, I was the co-coordinator of the Civil Society Internet Governance Caucus, which has something like 500 members from all over the world. And there's me from Little St. Lucia, and I was there. You can be there too. Last thing, the St. Lucia had an IGF courtesy of the CTU back about, I don't remember, 2007, 2009. It was one day during an ICT roadshow. At that meeting, though, the important thing was that there were maybe 12 students from one of the local schools. And we actually managed to prod one of them to actually say something. Those people need to be included. A youth IGF is great, but why not have one or two here now from the Virgin Islands? Why not have a person with disability? These people who, they can speak for themselves, and they should be allowed that opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deirdre. We have on the line Bernadette Lewis from the CTU. She would like to say, but just before Bernie comes on, I'm going to give Kevin 15 seconds to make a response.
Okay, thanks. 15. I just wanted to say is that I think we have a lot of experts around the room, in particular Cartoon's right next to me, where we could probably come up with some form of history of Caribbean internet governance. How we want to shape that, whether it's a publication or a course, is something that I will be volunteering to work with you, and it's something I think I can add a lot of value, not only for us in the room, but for others who will want to get into this space.
Thank you, Kevin. It's a well-thought idea. I think we are supportive of it. So now we're going to bring in Bernadette Lewis, who's, as you know, Secretary General of the Caribbean Telecommunications Union. She wants to have a response. Bernie, you're on.
Good to have you there. Oh, no, here we go. Right, okay then. Yes, we're just... Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. I've just been listening. I am sitting here listening to the very, very interesting discussion, rich discussion. And I wanted to just point to the fact that tomorrow I'll be talking about the new approach to Caribbean internet governance. And it is in a direct response to what our Barbados and IGF representatives have said over the course of the morning. And one of the challenges we've had in the region is that the CTU has been acting as the implementing agency for a lot of the work of the CIGF. And what we're trying to do is restructure how the CIGF operates, in that it does become a focal point, that it coordinates a lot of the activities. So you don't have a set of scattershot interventions, and you do not see any real meaningful advance of the internet governance agenda. There has been a lot of, for example, there's been a lot of trading in the region, and trading for the sake of trading doesn't take us anywhere. 2 weeks after the trading, you could barely remember what the trading was about. So the emphasis, the new coordinated approach that I'll be talking about tomorrow, it is training with a view to implementing and advancing the Caribbean Internet agenda. So a lot of the comments that I've heard, Rodney, good to have you, from Rodney and Ashal from Barbados, and some of the other points that were made by Kevin, they will be addressed in the presentation that we make tomorrow. And I think the document, the Caribbean Internet Development Foundation, that document has been made public. It is available. Nigel could tell you where it is. It should be on the CTU website. It seeks to provide that high-level coordination that is absolutely necessary. And it will enable us to relate better to the LAC IGF and the global IGF. And I think, please go ahead and read the document so that it's not cast in stone. We are soliciting your feedback on the document, and the structure that is put forward in the document is going to answer several of the questions that have been asked, and it will address some of the recommendations that I've heard this morning. So I thank you all.
Thank you, Madam SG. Thank you, Madam SG, for that intervention. We are at the end of the session. It's 1:01. I want to thank all of you for participating in a intense discussion. Thank you for the remote audience for staying with us. Throughout this session, you've heard some words that I wish to reinforce. It's engagement, cooperation, partnership. You talk about the subsidiarity principle, which is to say, get the solution from the people closest to the problem. And you've heard a lot of issues about how we collaborate to make this better. I am urging all of you to participate, to continue to read, continue to engage with each other across the region. I know as from experience that the Caribbean works best when we collaborate, especially in these matters concerning ideation and collaboration for common problems, common solutions to common problems that we have. Thank you all. Lunch, I believe, is out there. Nigel, what is the, I'll leave you to do the logistics. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Carlton, and all the speakers and commenters in this last session. It is lunch. We are running right now about half an hour behind our expected time, and we have a very interesting panel discussion that is scheduled to begin at 1:30. But so what I will ask you is, please try to come back here by 1:45 at least, such that we could begin that panel. It involves a remote participant as well. We expect to have a speaker from Facebook, and we are dealing with social media. So it would be good to hear some of the comments from them. I wouldn't like to miss it. So if we could be as quick and efficient as possible with lunch, and let's aim to see if we could restart by 1:45. Thank you.